There's a kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it threatens. It's not the absence of sound, but the weight of something unspoken pressing in from every side. The comeback lives in that silence. It watches, it waits, and when it speaks, it whispers through cracked walls and locked doors. On the surface, it's a horror film, a forgotten one, a minor entry in the catalog of British thrillers. But underneath, it's something far stranger, a slow-burning descent into paranoia, grief, and the terrifying possibility that some ghosts don't haunt you because they're dead, but because you left them behind. In 1978, this film slid quietly into theaters, almost unnoticed. But what happened behind the camera, the whispers, the vanishing reels, the performances that seem too real tells a different story. It's the kind of film that refuses to die. It lingers, like an unresolved chord or a dream you wake from gasping. These aren't just trivia bits, they're warnings, omitted footage, unspoken trauma, shadows that stuck to the cast and crew long after production ended. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about the comeback. And if you think the scariest part was on screen, you weren't paying attention. Fact 1. The scene that disappeared from every archive. In many international prints of the comeback, there is a gap so clean you might think it was intentional. A moment that should have been there felt, seen, endured, simply isn't. The missing sequence involved a long, suffocating shot of a woman's figure standing at the foot of the bed, her breath ragged, her silhouette barely shifting in the half-light. It was one of those scenes that didn't rely on jumps or tricks. It relied on duration, on holding the viewer in place until discomfort hardened into dread. Test screenings reacted badly, violently in some cases. A couple left the theater mid-scene. One viewer reportedly fainted. Distributors grew anxious. They feared the stillness, the intimacy of the moment would repel audiences rather than terrify them, so they ordered it removed. Walker resisted. He believed it was the emotional hinge of the film, the point where grief and the supernatural finally collided. But the studio insisted, and the sequence was shelved. Then it went further. The footage vanished entirely, not mislabeled, not misplaced, gone. Archive logs listed it once, then never again. Those who were present during the shoot still recall the tension on set that day. A sound operator quit after claiming he heard a second, deeper breath beneath the actresses. Whether that's a story told for effect or something more unsettling, no one has been able to verify. No copy of the scene has resurfaced, only the memory of something that was never meant to be forgotten and now can't be recovered. Fact 2. When the role started consuming Jack Jones entered the production with the confidence of a polished performer, an entertainer, not a method actor. He thought the comeback would be a curiosity, a challenge, maybe even a reinvention. What he didn't expect was how deeply the film would erode his sense of balance. Pete Walker believed psychological tension could not be faked, so he constructed an environment where Jones constantly felt a half step behind. Script pages were swapped hours before shooting. Scenes were staged differently than rehearsed. Sometimes the camera rolled without Jones being told, just to catch the unguarded moments, confusion, irritation, unease. Cast members later admitted they were instructed, not asked, to keep emotional distance from him. No casual conversation, no reassurance, no release valve. The isolation was deliberate. By the last weeks of production, Jones's on-screen exhaustion had seeped into real life. Crew members observed him pacing alone, muttering lines under his breath that weren't in any version of the script. His performance turned brittle, stripped of artifice. Later in interviews, he confessed he had begun to believe the film was closing in on him. He felt watched, even off-set. "The breakdown you see on screen," he said, "wasn't crafted. It was captured, and Walker kept every second of it." Fact 3. The house didn't need set decoration, it had its own history. The estate selected as the film's primary location wasn't chosen for convenience or aesthetics. It was selected for atmosphere, heavy, unwelcoming, charged with a kind of stale electricity. The locals didn't warn the crew about ghosts or legends. They only said the house had a memory, the sort that didn't fade with time. Walker refused to alter the space. The peeling wallpaper, the warped floorboards, the sooty-stained fireplaces, all were kept exactly as found. Even the cold patches and hallways with no vents were left untouched. Almost immediately, the crew experienced technical problems. Sound recorders picked up low murmurs with no source. Lights dimmed in rooms with stable wiring. A door that had been nailed shut swung open during a take. No one could explain it, and nobody wanted to volunteer a theory. Jack Jones avoided the upper corridor after claiming he heard someone walking behind him. A camera assistant described the house as constantly shifting, insisting the same staircase led somewhere different late one night. No one stayed alone in the building after that, and though no supernatural explanations were ever confirmed, many on the crew quietly admitted they felt like visitors, not occupants of a place that hadn't welcomed them in the first place. Fact 4. The day the police thought it was real. Production had barely settled into rhythm when the shoot was interrupted by sirens, not from the script, from real law enforcement, arriving without warning and demanding access to the set. The call had come from a local resident, one who had glimpsed through a cracked window pane what looked like a bloodied figure slumped against a wall, surrounded by flickering lights. The neighbor thought they had witnessed a crime scene. What they had seen was a setup for a key murder sequence, but when the officers entered, something felt wrong, not just because of the visuals, but because of the silence. The set was too still, too cold. Things got stranger when the crew tried to show the footage in question. The scene had been filmed earlier that day, or so they thought, but the playback revealed nothing. The camera had malfunctioned. The audio was static. One officer reportedly muttered, "That's not possible," and left the room. Another asked to see the call sheet to verify the names of everyone working that day. By the time the misunderstanding was cleared, several hours had been lost. The scene was never reshot. That part of the basement was sealed off, unused for the rest of the production. Walker never spoke about it publicly, but a lighting technician later recalled, "We staged horror, then reality staged it back." Fact 5. Pete Walker nearly became the killer, literally. Most directors observe from behind the camera. Pete Walker, for a moment, considered stepping in front of it in full costume, behind the mask, wielding the sickle, not for ego, for control. In early concept meetings, Walker floated the idea that the killer in the comeback should remain anonymous, not just in story, but in presence. No actor, no credits, no face, just movement. And he believed the only way to preserve that detachment was to play the role himself. He had a mask molded to his specifications. He rehearsed with stunt coordinators. One scene was even filmed with him in the role. According to a producer, the resulting footage was disturbingly empty, like watching violence committed by absence. Walker abandoned the idea days later. He claimed it crossed a line, though he never said which one. Only one still from the test shoot survives. It shows a shadowed figure holding the blade, posture rigid, head slightly tilted, not quite human. Whether the image disturbs because of what it shows, or because of who we know is inside the costume, that's still debated. Fact 6. The most terrifying scream was never rehearsed. Pamela Stevenson's scream in the dressing room sequence isn't theatrical, it's visceral, too sharp, too real, and there's a reason. She wasn't acting. For that scene, her character was supposed to stumble into a staged murder aftermath. Blood packs, plastic organs, nothing unexpected. But Walker, ever the manipulator, had changed the plan. He ordered the props department to replace everything with actual animal remains organs freshly delivered from a local butcher. The smell alone was overwhelming. No one informed Stevenson. When cameras rolled, she entered the set and immediately recoiled. Her face went pale. She tried to speak but gagged. What came out instead was a scream that startled even the sound crew. She broke down after the take, not from fear, but from betrayal. She'd trusted the team. Walker never apologized. He called the moment cinematic honesty. The footage made it into the final cut, untouched. The scream, raw and jagged, remains one of the film's most unnerving moments, not because of what's seen, but because of what was done to capture it. Fact 7. The mask had a life, before the film and after. That blank, expressionless mask worn by the killer in The Comeback is not a one-of-a-kind creation. It wasn't crafted uniquely for the film. In fact, it had a past and possibly a reputation. Originally sculpted for a forgotten student horror short years earlier, the mask was never intended for mainstream use. That short film was shut down halfway through production, allegedly after the lead actor suffered a breakdown. The mask was shelved, stored in a box, and later sold off with miscellaneous props. It was Pete Walker who found it, buried under dust, in a prop warehouse. He said it gave him the chills, which was exactly why he chose it. "It doesn't need expression," he said. "It's already watching." During the shoot, crew members were unsettled by the mask's presence. One grip refused to be on set during its close-ups. The actor wearing it often claimed to feel dizzy while in costume, even during short takes. After filming wrapped, the mask disappeared. It wasn't archived or stored. No one signed it out. no one remembers who had it last. Years later, a collector claimed to have seen it again in the background of an unrelated indie film made in France. The mask wasn't acknowledged in credits, but it was there, in shadow, unmoving. Some say it always finds its way back to a camera. Fact 8. The scene that British TV refused to broadcast. In the early 80 seconds, the comeback was set to premiere on British television. Late night slot, minimal edits. But just hours before airtime, the broadcast was pulled. No explanation was given to the public. Internally, the reason was clear. One particular scene had triggered concern. A sequence involving a slowly panning shot through a crimson-stained dressing room overlaid with warped, reversed audio that sounded uncannily like someone crying. That audio wasn't listed in the sound logs. It didn't match any recorded performance. And one anonymous technician claimed it resembled a real police tape from a domestic crime investigation, a tape that had never been made public. Whether true or not, the BBC refused to air the film. When it eventually returned to TV years later, the sequence was removed. Bootleg VHS copies of the original version did circulate, and those who heard the uncut audio described it as more than just disturbing. They called it invasive, like something meant to be heard only once. No official acknowledgement has ever been made, but that specific scene, it's never been aired again. Fact 9. The composer wanted his name removed. Stanley Myers, a composer best known for sweeping, emotional scores, agreed to work on The Comeback during a period of creative experimentation. But what started as a genre exercise turned into something else entirely. Myers submitted a score filled with ambient dread, backward strings, detuned lullabies, whispers buried beneath melody. The effect was suffocating. Not traditional horror, something more psychological. But after viewing the completed cut, Myers was unsettled. He reportedly stormed out of the screening, furious that his music had been twisted into something sadistic. He requested his name be taken off the credits. The producers declined contractually. They weren't obligated to remove it. Still, Myers never mentioned the film again. Not in interviews, not in retrospectives. Some music historians believe elements of the score were repurposed from early demo tapes tied to unrelated sound experiments, projects Myers had abandoned due to the emotional toll they took. Whatever the truth, The Comeback remains an outlier in his body of work, a score disowned by its own creator, but remembered by those who felt it in their bone. Fact 10. The ending that never made it to the light. When The Comeback finally reached cinemas, its conclusion was ambiguous, melancholic, but intact. The protagonist survives, or at least remains standing, but that was never the plan. In Pete Walker's earliest drafts, the story ended with complete surrender. The lead character, worn down by grief, hallucinations, and dread, was supposed to walk calmly out to the cliffs beyond the estate and vanish. No sound, no scream, just sea and silence. Walker believed it was the only honest way to end the film. Not with a scream, but with a surrender. The producers disagreed. They argued that the audience would leave feeling hollow, disoriented, in a way that felt more depressive than thrilling. After heated discussions, the final scene was restructured. The suicide ending was filmed, but only once. No alternate takes, no safety net. Then, as the story goes, the reel containing that scene was destroyed during internal review. Not stored, not archived, destroyed. Today, all that remains of the original ending are a few black and white stills taken during setup. One shows Jones, alone at the cliff's edge, eyes blank, wind flattening his coat. No dialogue, no epilogue, just a man walking into nothing. Fact 11. The set designer who started seeing rooms that didn't exist. Norman Goff wasn't superstitious. He had worked on thrillers, horrors, period dramas, never once rattled. But The Comeback broke something in him. During pre-production, Goff began reporting sleep disturbances. He'd wake up unsure of where he was. He started drawing designs for rooms no one asked for: narrow hallways, warped door frames, windows that faced brick walls. When asked, he insisted these rooms were part of the house. "I saw them," he said. "They're there. We just haven't opened the right doors." One design, a long, narrow corridor leading to a room with mirrors on all sides, was especially vivid. Weeks later, a grip discovered a section of the manor that had been walled off decades earlier. When they broke through, the layout was uncannily similar to Goff's sketches. After that, he withdrew, stopped sleeping, communicated in short, clipped sentences. He completed the production, then left the industry. His final interview was a single quote, given years later: "Some houses are still building themselves. They just use people to finish the job." Fact 12. The crew member who walked away and erased himself. R. Mansfield appeared on the production paperwork as a junior assistant, lighting support, logistics, nothing remarkable. He wasn't interviewed. He didn't hang around after hours. He did his work quietly until he didn't. Halfway through filming, Mansfield stopped showing up. At first, the crew assumed he'd quit. No formal notice, no word. But when a coordinator tried to check on him, they found his apartment empty, no forwarding address, no belongings. The name turned up nothing in union records, no prior credits, no future work. It was as if he had never existed, except for one blurry photo taken during setup, where a man stands half out of frame, holding a light meter, looking not at the camera but past it. Walker was asked later about Mansfield's disappearance. He didn't elaborate. Some people, he said, come into these productions like shadows. Maybe they leave the same way. Some believe Mansfield was never hired officially. Others suggest he was a pseudonym covering for someone else on set. But the question that remains is this: if he wasn't part of the official crew, how did he end up in the call sheets? Fact 13. The title that was too disturbing for posters. Before it became The Comeback, the film was being developed under a very different name: Voices from the Room. A phrase lifted directly from an early script draft, and one that was reportedly scrawled in pencil across Walker's production notebook dozens of times. It wasn't just a title, it was a motif. Whispers through walls, conversations heard but never seen, phones that rang with no one on the line. In the original structure, these voices weren't metaphorical, they were the evidence of something beneath the surface, seeping up through the seams of the house. Walker favored the name. He felt it captured the unnerving stillness that defined the story, but test audiences didn't respond well. Some felt it was too abstract, while studio marketers feared it evoked something too dark, too intimate, something people wouldn't want on a theater marquee. They pushed for The Comeback, a title with broader appeal, more ambiguity, a safer disguise. But Walker never let the original idea go. In multiple scenes, if you listen closely, you'll hear sounds layered beneath the dialogue, faint murmurs, backward phrases, unidentifiable breaths. To some, they're just effects. To others, they're remnants of the version of the film that could have been a version where the voices weren't buried. They were center stage. Fact 14. One simple scene took 47 takes and something changed. There's a brief sequence in The Comeback where the protagonist walks slowly down a hallway, holding a candle, humming quietly to himself. It lasts less than a minute. No jump scare, no twist. But that single moment required 47 takes to complete. Jack Jones couldn't seem to finish the walk. Sometimes the candle went out, sometimes he stumbled, other times he simply stopped, mid-hum, staring into the dark as if he'd seen something the crew hadn't. Technicians checked the airflow, no explanation. The dolly track was inspected, realigned, nothing worked. Even the camera batteries began to drain faster than expected. On take 23, the flame extinguished in dead air. No breeze, no movement, just gone. The room remained completely still. After that, morale shifted. A boom operator refused to continue. One assistant producer described feeling watched through the monitor. Eventually, one clean take was captured, and the crew insisted on moving on immediately. But when the footage was reviewed later, something odd appeared. A faint, slow shadow gliding along the back wall. No actor had been behind Jones. No crew stood in that space. Walker kept it in the final cut. He never addressed it publicly. Fact 15. The reflection scene was drawn from a real encounter. One of the most iconic and unsettling shots in The Comeback occurs when the main character gazes into a mirror and sees a figure behind him, not moving, not threatening, just there. It's become a signature horror moment. But it wasn't born from fiction. According to Walker, the idea came from a real incident years before the film was written. He had been staying at a seaside inn, exhausted after a long project. In the middle of the night, he went to the bathroom and caught his own reflection looking wrong, tilted, slower than him. And standing behind him, in the space between door and curtain, was a child-sized silhouette. When he turned, nothing was there, but the image never left him. It wasn't fear, he once said. It was like being recognized. That moment became the blueprint for the mirror scene. No effects, just blocking and timing. And when they shot it, something strange happened again. The actor portraying the shadow behind Jones claimed he never stood that way, head tilted, hand raised. But the footage shows it clearly. A moment no one remembers filming, but everyone remembers watching. And when paused, the figure in the reflection doesn't appear to match the actor at all. Fact 16. She had 3 lines, then she stopped talking forever. Marion Hartley wasn't a household name. She wasn't even a featured player. Just a background character, a maid with a few glances, a few carefully timed lines, and one slow walk down a hallway. But after filming wrapped, Hartley withdrew from public life. Not gradually, not because of scandal, just Silence. She declined interviews. She ignored stage offers. Colleagues said she stopped returning calls. When a theater director tracked her down months later, she answered the door with a notebook in hand. Every response she gave was written, short, disjointed. One of them read, "It followed me out. What did? No one knows." Hartley refused to explain. Years later, a fan spotted her at a niche horror festival. The Comeback was screening in the final slot. She stayed in the back row, didn't react. Until that hallway scene, her scene played. She stood up, walked out, and was never seen publicly again. Walker called her performance haunting in ways she didn't intend. Whether that was praise or apology is still unclear. Fact 17. The knife wasn't a prop and it found its way back. Among the many chilling objects in the Comeback, one stands out, the ceremonial dagger. Small, ornate, curved at the tip, used in a key scene where fantasy and violence blur together. It looked too authentic for its budget. Because it was. The dagger had been purchased from a curio shop in Sussex, where it had sat for years with no provenance. The owner described it only as something once used with purpose. After filming, the dagger vanished, not archived, not sold, not listed. Some assumed it was stolen, others weren't so sure. Then, in 2009, a private horror museum in Poland received a package with no return address. Inside, the dagger, wrapped in yellowed cloth, along with a note that read, "This does not belong among people." Appraisers confirmed the weapon matched frame for frame with the one in the Comeback. But when tested, traces of dried organic matter were discovered in the grooves, not animal. The museum locked the display behind reinforced glass. But even today, staff report strange behavior near the case, lights flickering, motion sensors triggering without movement. As for the donor, their identity has never been discovered. Fact 18. A film student lost himself inside the movie. In 1980, a graduate student in London named Colin R. began writing a thesis on psychological horror in British cinema. The Comeback became his case study. At first, it was academic. Character analysis, production, history, symbolism. But within weeks, his notes shifted. Margins filled with mirrored handwriting, diagrams of the house's floor plan appeared, sketched over and over, with arrows pointing to walls marked open. He began sleeping in lecture halls. He told professors he was not supposed to leave yet. He started whispering lines from the film under his breath, lines that weren't in the final cut. Eventually, campus security found him in a darkened screening room, playing the film on loop. When they tried to speak to him, he reportedly asked, "Have you heard her yet?" Colin was hospitalized soon after. His thesis was never submitted. His research was sealed by the university. The only surviving quote from his work was scribbled on the back of a film canister. It plays back more than images. Fact 19. The fire that tried to erase the film. In 1986, a fire tore through a film storage facility outside Surrey, reducing hundreds of reels to ash. Among them was the original negative of the Comeback, or so everyone thought. The damage was extensive. Rows of film stock melted beyond salvage, but somehow, the section containing most of the Comeback's materials remained intact, all except for Reel 1. That reel, containing the film's opening scenes and an extended dream montage that had been cut before release, was completely destroyed. No backup print existed, no transfer, only cryptic notes in the editor's log that read, "Too abstract. Audio disturbs pacing." Walker claimed the lost sequence included a fragmented memory loop, religious icons, blood-streaked reflections, whispers layered so deep even the crew couldn't parse them. Some believe the footage was removed deliberately and destroyed long before the fire. Others see coincidence. But for a film obsessed with memory and loss, beginning with a missing piece feels strangely appropriate. Today, all that remains are a few production stills, blurry, distorted, bathed in unnatural red light. The first 10 minutes of the original vision are gone, or maybe, just buried somewhere no one has dared to look again. Fact 20. The final shot was missing something until you listen. The last frame of the Comeback lingers on Jack Jones's face, broken, haunted, but still, audiences remember the silence, the weight of it. But that wasn't how the film was supposed to end. Walker's intended conclusion included a hidden audio track played beneath the credits at almost imperceptible volume, a reversed lullaby, sung in a woman's voice. The idea was to haunt, not shock, to suggest that whatever was haunting the character had followed him out. But studio executives pulled it. They feared lawsuits from viewers. They believed the subliminal element would be seen as manipulative, even dangerous. Walker relented, but the audio track remained buried in some rare versions. In certain European VHS releases, the whisper slipped through. Fans who reversed the audio uncovered a chilling translation: "You were never alone." No official version has ever included it since. But if you listen closely, even now, under the quiet, something remains. And once you hear it, silence doesn't feel the same again. Bonus fact: the voice that shouldn't exist. It happens quickly, so quickly that most viewers never notice. A scene midway through the comeback, almost still, just the main character pausing in a corridor. No movement, no music. And then, quietly, it comes. A whisper. Just one word. Don't. It doesn't appear in the subtitles. It's not credited. And no one, cast, crew, or sound team, has ever claimed responsibility for recording it. When the master audio files were reviewed, there was no waveform for the sound, no spike, no trace. Some chalked it up to audio bleed. Others, a glitch in the analog transfer. But here's the part that haunts. When an independent sound engineer ran a forensic check in 2003, they isolated the signal, amplified, cleaned. What had sounded like "don't" wasn't a warning, it was a sentence. Slowed down, the full phrase was, "Don't come back. You weren't supposed to leave." Walker denied adding it. The sound editor had no record of it in any draft, and the actress whose voice it resembles had finished all her lines 2 weeks before that scene was shot. Today, the whisper still exists in every version of the film, buried, subtle, but once you've heard it, you can't unhear it. And sometimes, when you mute the film entirely, you'll still hear it anyway. What do you think happened behind the scenes of the comeback? Was it just a low-budget horror with a troubled shoot? Or something that slipped into places it shouldn't have? Let us know in the comments which fact stayed with you the longest. And tell us which forgotten film you want us to dig up next. If you made it this far, don't just disappear. Subscribe, like, and stay close. We've got more shadows to uncover.